So, who didn't see this one coming? After multiple requests to cover specific creatures in this game, I have finally caved in and determined now is the time to strike. The events taking place in Resident Evil 2 are ones of pure biological nature, but there are some interesting things concerning these infected. But like all good stories, we must first start from the beginning to understand just how exactly Raccoon City became overrun with infected, but they're still technically living. Like most horror games, it begins with a flower, but not just any flower, a flower grown in a cave. Native to Africa exists a particular floral organism that has been revered by native tribes in the area. To them, this flower had the ability to choose who their next leader would be. If a person could consume this flower, known as the Stairway to the Sun, they would then ascend to their leadership role. But with this consumption, they would also be imbued with great power. Many would attempt to eat this flower and take the role of leader, but most would die. In the Stairway to the Sun exists a particular virus that seems to have a symbiotic relationship with the plant, as attempts to grow it outside of the cave were unsuccessful. The virus does not appear to infect the flower's cells, instead using it as a carrier. Upon being eaten by a human, it begins infecting cells within an hour, which will either lead to the alteration of the human genome imbuing it with power, or lead to their outright expiration. This virus is known as the progenitor virus. The progenitor virus is a double-stranded RNA virus, which as a biologist and scientist is exceedingly strange. I'm just going to point that out to you guys. This virus should be noted as being extremely aggressive and fast-acting, having such a minor incubation time. Its effects would almost seem to indicate that the progenitor virus was bred specifically for the human body. However, I do not see this being the case, as its seclusion to a strange flower in a cave would have it interact with humans at a very low rate. This would mean that the progenitor virus is one so virulent and potent that it would need to be very old, perhaps almost as old as life itself. So join me on a side tangent, if you will. Typically, certain viruses will affect certain creatures depending on the interaction it has with that species and how long it has been around for. Take SIV for instance. Simian immunodeficiency virus existed in apes before jumping to humans, becoming HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Due to our similarities between apes and humans in our genome, the virus was able to, in time, make this leap. However, the progenitor virus seems to be able to exist in plants and animals. This is exceedingly interesting. This would suggest that it has been around before the split between plants and animals actually even happened. It bases its abilities off perhaps a very old version of our DNA and cellular mechanisms. So as we know, as everything has gone, things change over time and adapt. We call this evolution, which means that our DNA does change as the more successful of a species continues to go and reproduce. So there have been changes. If you compare our DNA to that of a prokaryotic bacteria, there are still similarities between the two. So this is what the progenitor virus does. It takes a very old portion of our DNA, and perhaps there are certain mechanisms in place that the progenitor is able to use, no matter the species. So basically, if I had to take a stab at it, a virus that can infect animals, fungi, and plants would have to be a virus that preyed upon the first versions of life on our planet. So thanks for bearing with me on that. I thought it was a really cool idea. Anyhow, so basically, this is where all the trouble begins in this universe. For those not familiar with the lore, there is a pharmaceutical company who comes into contact with this flower and subsequently the virus. They begin to recognize the power that this might wield. Originally, they intended to take the flower and grow it on American soil, but when the flowers grew, the progenitor virus was absent. This issue was rectified by driving the native tribes out of the area and locking down the cave system where the virus was. This led to a multitude of ethics violation, as can be imagined, but regardless, Umbrella had control of the virus. Originally, the moral gray areas began to form, as what they wanted to do with the virus kinda was pretty bad. Its initial reasoning was that they were going to alter the virus in a way that would allow them to change the human genome to help humanity as a whole, but this eugenics project was still basically forced evolution on a people. To fund the project, it was initially picked up as a military project. As time passed and the virus was experimented on, they eventually turned the progenitor virus into the T-virus. The T-virus was a bioweapon that was determined to be too powerful to be effective. Seems pretty strange, right? Well, this particular virus was 100% fatal, but on top of that, it killed people so quickly that it couldn't spread properly. They would have to drop a large amount on an area to infect people to destabilize a region. At this point, you may as well have just carpet bombed the target. It really does the same thing. So to combat this issue, they ended up altering the virus even further. This is where we pick up on the events and decimation of Raccoon City. Resident Evil 2 see you fighting against infected from the perspective of two different storylines, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Both will have you fighting against virtually ungame-endable zombies who just keep getting back up, and Mr. X, who's definitely gonna give it to you. Watch out because he's actually got a pretty wicked right hook. As you make your way through the game, you encounter more and more powerful forms of infected, all with their morphology twisted due to the effects of the T-Virus, or even in some cases because of the G-Virus. Beginning slowly but spreading rapidly, the virus was altered just enough to change them into shambling infected. However, these infected should be noted as they're not dead. The T-Virus is incapable of infecting dead cells as it relies on cells' reverse transcriptase to produce more virions. This being the case, the virus no longer kills the host quickly, instead degrading their bodies but adding strength in other areas. The virus first and foremost attacks the brain and nervous system of a person. The areas of the brain that appear highly affected seem to be the cerebrum and cerebellum. The cerebrum is destroyed, leaving a creature incapable of higher thought but still able to perform simple tasks, and it must maintain some sort of object permanence, seeing as they know when you go behind a door, you're actually still there. This damage to the cerebrum is quite pronounced, but perhaps the most internal portions are not as affected. The cerebellum is likely damaged too, or at least as much as the cerebrum, as their movement has become sloppy and sluggish. Even with their movement severely hindered in your standard infected, they are quite mobile, spreading out over the entire city and attacking anyone they have found. This has made them quite lethal in numbers. Another area of the brain which seems to fall right in line with the infected is the hypothalamus and amygdala areas being altered. This kind of sounds exactly like my last video, come to think about it, but I bring up these areas as the T-Virus has damaged them, leading to increased aggression in the infected, but also a propensity to engage in cannibalism. This aggression and biting helps spread the virus further, eventually turning the area into a city of undead. And I know they're not supposed to be undead, so really just infected. Another trait that should be noted by the T-Virus is the alterations it makes to the host's body. Now, I fully intend on covering the T-Virus and G-Virus in much greater and finely tuned detail later on, but for now, these alterations of the body are almost superhuman, but it also should be known that they do necrotize a lot of the body. They're able to withstand a direct headshot, which would be such a grievous wound to a human, it would put us down almost immediately. This inability to be brought down by most normal means has created an army able to infect quite quickly and with little resistance, or little effective resistance. Another issue is the genetic variability amongst hosts and the changes to the virus itself. Certain individuals have been noted to be more heavily influenced by the virus, turning into liquors or fusing with plant material. All in all, in Raccoon City, they're essentially just a guinea pig for the Umbrella Corporation, who deployed what would appear to be an ancient virus and are testing its effects. The effects of the virus at first killed most it came into contact with, and then it was changed further, which killed everyone it came into contact with. Then it was changed again so that the virus could actually propagate properly and create shambling, necrotic infected who are much more powerful than your standard human. So for those that didn't know, you are now in the know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick rundown over Resident Evil 2 and kind of what is happening in Resident Evil 2 Remake and where we are in the game, I suppose. I find that this virus is extremely interesting due to its origins and how it alters the human genome. But what I find most fascinating about it is the biological changes it induces in a human. I know this was a short video today, but I wanted to just drop this so that you know that yes, indeed, Resident Evil 2 Remake is coming, and I will be discussing all the variants within the game. And believe me, there is a lot of lore and biology behind it, so get ready for that. If you guys did enjoy it, then please leave a like on your way out. If you are new and enjoyed it, I usually cover more biological oriented videos, but I have started dropping these quick kind of crash courses lately, and people do seem to enjoy them. So if that sounds like your thing, why not subscribe? It's a good way to keep up. Coming out later this week, I have a collaboration with Hidden Xperia, and I think you guys will probably enjoy it. I will drop my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon links in the description if anybody's interested in that. And speaking of patrons, I would like to thank mine. At the scientist tier, we have Arulam Lupe, and next up we have Artyom Chornage. And last but not least, it's Not a Spoon. Our residents are A. Laurantis, Greater Genes 83, Oz Hickman, and Richard Muhlenberg. Good to see you back, man. Holding their PhD in genetics, we have Allison Caspero, Andrew Lawson, Divine Whisper, and Laffy No Skill. With their masters in biology, we have Adam Hartswick, Brandon Brotherton, Cameron Smith, Edgy McGee, John Russo, Scott Grant, Renalize, The Otterman, and Zervellian. And lastly, with their bachelors in morphological sciences, we have Add to the List, Ahigao Comics, Alex the Gun Guy, Anthony Wolf, Captain Gasmask, Dustin Ellis, Gems, Molten Tarts, Professor Bennett's, Riot, and Russell McBride. Thank you guys for your continued support. So I know, again, short video, but be ready Saturday because that will not be a short video. Thank you guys for watching, and I I will see y'all in the next one.